Hello, and welcome to Heal with Carmen B. Today's podcast will be focused on mental health challenges in the minority community, and we are interviewing three incredible therapists that represent the minority community. And at this time, I'll have you introduce yourselves. So we can start with Venita.
Hi, my name is Venita Qualls, and I'm a licensed drug and alcohol counselor in the cities of Taunton and Fall River, Massachusetts.
My name is Omar Ruiz. I am a licensed marriage and family therapist out of Boston, Massachusetts.
My name is Keovongsa. I'm a licensed social worker. I do private practice in Cambridge.
Welcome, and thank you all for being here with me today. Can I have you all talk about how long you've been working in the field of mental health?
Sorry, me?
Yeah, sure.
Sure. I've been in private practice for a little over 4 years. That's all I've ever known. Is just working individually with couples and individuals, particularly young adults. So young adult development. That's.
Thank you.
For me, I would say, including the time before and during my graduate school experience, going about almost 10 years within mental health. And that experience ranges from working at nonprofits to local public and charter schools to clinics and hospital settings, as well as a previous private practice that I held.
And myself, I have a private practice in Taunton and Fall River. It's been up for 3 years. I've been in human services for over 30 years, but in the counseling about 9 years.
Nice. So first I want to say that I considered myself to be very clever, and I was a comedian in my past life. So this morning I came up with a new word called sprinter, because it is spring, but it still feels like winter.
Correct.
Yes. So when I woke up this morning and saw the snow, I was like, wow, it's supposed to be spring, but that's okay. The show must go on. So here we are. And so the first question we'll start with is, what are the most common stigmas regarding mental health and therapy in the minority communities? And how do you address these stigmas?
Well, I think that in minority communities, people don't want to reckon that they have mental health issues, and that's a big problem. Back in the day, I'm probably a little older than most of you guys on the panel.
That's okay. You're right. Right.
Back in the day, they would just say, "Oh, something's wrong with that person, but they'll be all right. Something's wrong with that person, but they'll be all right." But as mental health goes through generations, it doesn't get better. Right. It doesn't get all right. So a big stigma is not recognizing that there are mental health issues and being able to address them, such as the depression, such as the alcohol use or the drug use. And they're thinking that it's okay just to use, but are you using for self-medication? And so I find that that's a big stigma, big issue.
Yeah, absolutely. I think another big one is seeing mental health or mental health issues as a sign of weakness. Yeah. It's just this idea that you should be able to do it on your own. You should be able to grind through and have this grit. And if you don't, then it's like that tapping out, is a sign of failure, weakness. Mm-hmm. I hear a lot of people just are perplexed or why can't you get it together? Mm-hmm. Like I'm a survivor. Why can't you just figure it out, right? And so, it's this idea that if we ask for help, somehow that means that we're digressing or something, or failing.
I heard this term mostly in regards to men of toxic masculinity, right? And just really talking about what the expectation is for men and how that contributes to mental health as well.
I would say that to both answer the question and go off of what you were saying, it's a development of certain narratives that get passed through generations. For instance, if we're talking about toxic masculinity, I'm thinking about how Men choose to raise their young boys. If a young boy and a young girl falls and they start crying, previously and maybe even currently, the parents might go and hold the young girl. But if it's a young boy, it's you have to man up.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
have to wipe off those tears.
Yes.
We don't need crying around us. And so then it becomes this notion as though like men are machines. We're not designed or made to have or express emotions. And there's on certain exceptions. So like if your mom passes away, God forbid, that's an okay time. But that's still, if you're lingering too much in those emotions, then it's just too much. You're seen as weak or you need to get help. To go back to answer the question, I think from me, the stigma has been connected to the sense of crazy. That there's something wrong with you, that you're not normal, and that you just have to suck it up. And unfortunately, that's also a narrative of what that means if we try to analyze previous histories of society and how mental health has become to where it is now. It's a lot of these stories of the abnormal. Even with the literature that as mental health providers that we use as a guiding force towards diagnosing, I would say that being gay was an abnormality, and that was in literature. And so, and then as time progresses, and as people start realizing, like, no, that's not a disorder of any sort, then people start adapting to it. So I think stigmas still do exist in pockets, but I think society and people within the field are pushing for more of a different view. Even though sometimes, even in the media, I think therapy is portrayed very dramatically, but I'm assuming that's because they want to have an audience, and so no one's just laying down in the couch. I want you to lay down on the couch because there's a likelihood you're gonna fall asleep when I'm trying to talk to you, and so I would say that I'll just go like that.
It's interesting to hear you. I've never heard about being gay as an abnormality in literature. So it's really interesting to hear how not only has culture contributed to these stigmas or society contributed to these stigmas, but even people who are supposed to be the ones who know, right? And the researchers, and to put that in the book and how that then also contributed to these stigmas. And then to hear you talk about crazy, right? So I think like in the minority community, crazy most identifies with women,
Right.
and weak most identifies with the men, right? And so as a woman who utilizes mental health services, who I am a strong advocate for mental health services, I still struggle with who would I give that information to? Who would I tell, yeah, I have a therapist and yeah, I utilize mental health services, because what are they going to think of me if I tell them that? How are they going to view me if I tell them that? Right?
I want to go back to what Omar said. We look at cultures in the minority community. We have a black woman, we have a Spanish male, we have an Asian male, and the culture itself gives you the big stigma too. And to go with what Omar said, it was homosexuals in the DSM-2. We're in the DSM-5 right now.
Can you explain DSG? Because
the Diagnostic Statistical
That big
Manual,
for us
what we
folks.
clinicians use to diagnose mental health symptoms, disorders. And so it was in one of the DSMs that, homosexuality was a disorder, a disease. So as time goes on, it gets edited, it gets more known to be not what society thinks it should be. And I think that also culture plays a lot in the stigma of mental health. Boys are not supposed to cry. Get up. Boys don't cry. You're a big boy, and you call it a little girl, and I believe it hardens a person, it hardens them. And so as they go along in life, they have less emotions, and it makes it really difficult. And so I think that's where the problem comes in with having more males come in for mental health counseling than the women.
And so the challenge with that is having more male therapists,
Correct.
right, in the community, because there's a serious shortage, and most men would prefer a male therapist.
Correct.
Right, and so that's, of course, I'm sure, is another big challenge in the minority community. And so, when it comes to your work in the minority community, what are some of the biggest challenges you face with reaching individuals or really be able to be successful in the services you provide, given the stigmas and the challenges that the minority community faces?
I would say access to resources. So for me, at least from my experience of working with the Spanish-speaking community, regardless of how many Spanish-speaking individuals live within a certain community or a certain section, it doesn't necessarily mean that there are enough resources to access. Some limited resources could just be a translated pamphlet to provide to them, or because a lot of them might have to use their insurance if they have insurance, and that I could use that as another sense of resource. So if there's folks who are migrating here to the States and they might be concerned about accessing insurance, because how is that going to be connected to immigration and policy and deportation?
Yes.
And so then, because of that lack of education and lack of knowledge and lack of understanding the systems, then they are not being, they as individuals or as people, as family, are not receiving the supports that there might actually exist. Then you go into certain resources that may exist more towards someone who has commercial insurances versus Medicaid, or at least in Massachusetts, it will be known as Mass Health.
Yes.
Granted, it's been a good number of years that Mass Health has been working towards trying to expand the amount of services that they're providing within the community. But as soon as the community starts realizing that these services exist, such as home-based family counseling, or someone who's able to coordinate services for them, then you start noticing a huge influx of waiting list, because there's so many people that realize, oh, this resources exist,
Right.
and we're pushing for the community to be able to utilize this. However, then you have wait lists, and not even getting started to the potential wait list or shortage of bilingual or multilingual providers, in which even with them, now I can speak to myself, where whenever I was working within a nonprofit or even my private practice, just sector, it would be so much of me feeling as though, am I not doing enough for the community because I'm only one person? And if I need to refer people out to other agencies or other providers, there's but so many of them. Especially with me, if they're looking for a Spanish speaking male, how many are there
Yes.
within 5 miles of them? Because a lot of folks might want to use public transportation to get to their location. And so I would say my first piece and my main piece would be limited access to resources, even if resources are there, just the limitation of what people can receive.
Yeah.
I would say, to go with that, a big challenge that I see is, I think a lot of minorities have strong beliefs about what emotions are. Like this idea that emotions are inherently good or bad, right? We sort of grow up with this list of understanding, like, okay, here are the good emotions, here are the bad emotions, let's try to avoid bad emotions. And I think in working with individuals in the Black and Asian community, I noticed that, you know, sitting and processing through a particular emotion is actually really difficult, right? Because that's not something you grow up really learning to say, oh, it's okay for you to feel sad.
Yes.
It's okay for you to even be mad, right? Like, you know, especially in my family growing up, like anger was a very dangerous emotion and you had to suppress it or else you would lose control, right? And I think, you know, just with men in general, even just this idea of like being able to sit with anger without getting, you know, overly provoked or letting it take over, right? But being able to process through difficult emotions, I think that in and of itself is a huge barrier for progress in therapy.
Thank you.
I feel that with everything, with Kevin, with Omar said is all true, and the problem is a lack of resources. The traditional clinics are white. You know, they're managed by, you know, white males, white women. There's not a lot of Asian males, Asian females, Spanish males, Spanish females, and so people want to see their people, and because you understand me,
Right.
you
can relate.
understand what I'm going, you're relating to me, you understand what I'm going through. And so I find that that's a big problem. It's a big challenge in the communities, that lack of resource. And also, again, with the emotions, you know, having someone to understand how they're feeling and able to process that. I was talking to a clinician this morning about the same topic about, you know, males not wanting to show emotions. And if I did cry to you, you know, did cry to another clinician or to a person, then I'm weak. And so I've now exposed my vulnerability, and now I don't want to come back and get any more services. Embarrassed, shame, you know, but as clinicians, we know that's kind of like a breakthrough. But the clients themselves, they may see it as weakness, and that can be a problem too.
I'm glad you brought up breakthrough. One thing I think about when I talk to friends or family about seeking mental health services, and we talk about, you know, maybe there was a breakthrough, but in nowadays, everyone wants instant gratification, right? Like you go to a therapist, all right, I've seen my therapist for 2 months and I still feel like shit. Like this is not working. The therapist is not working. The therapist, you know, so I'm going to stop. I'm not going anymore because clearly that's not what I needed. So, you know, no one wants to trust the process, right? And understand that it took, let's say you're 30, it took 30 years to have your life where it is, to be jacked up, to be emotionalist, have trauma. It took 30 years. How is it going to take 2 months to fix that, right? And so having people to also understand, I can also imagine as a challenge for you is having people to understand that it's a process. It's a process, and there's no time on the process, but it's a process, and it's a process that you have to be willing to go through.
Being a licensed drug and alcohol counselor, you know, I work with clients that have an understanding of the 12 steps. AA and NA use the 12, Alcoholics Anonymous, Narcotics Anonymous, they use the 12 steps. And I always tell them the 12 steps is not based on 12 days, 12 hours, 12 months. It's a lifetime process. And the healing process is lifetime. And they come to see us, people come to see us, and they do want instant gratification. But we have to let them know that to change your thought process, to change your pattern of thinking, it takes time. And, you know, we're not going to fix you overnight, but we can work on a treatment plan that's going to help you make the changes that you want in your life. And again, some people don't want change. It can be uncomfortable to learn something different. It can be uncomfortable to do something I really don't want to do, but I know it's for my best. So it can be really challenging.
Right. And also to keep in mind that it's not a therapist's job to fix you, right? But once you come to conclusion into the terms of, I am responsible for myself. I go to a therapist for support. I go to a therapist to learn coping mechanisms and to build the skills I need to develop and have a growth mindset to be able to move forward and heal and build the life that I deserve. But it's not your therapist's responsibility. It's your responsibility because you go to the therapist, you see your therapist for a half an hour. That's 1 hour out of 23. The other 23 hours are yours. That's where the work is. You know, what are you going to do when you leave the therapist office, right? And so I think that's also something really important to keep in mind when seeking help and seeking the support of a therapist, that the work is really yours.
Let me throw in, I think something interesting too with that is like in stepping into the client's shoes, especially saying in my culture, I'm from Southeast Asia, and the idea of turning to a stranger pretty much to ask for help and to confide in, to connect with, that's like not a frame of reference that one can understand, right? And so I think in that, like sitting in an office and working with someone and just basically giving your deepest and darkest to a stranger, that is probably very difficult, right? And so the frame of reference for what therapy even is a barrier.
Yes.
Like, what is therapy?
Yeah.
Right? That's the question. Like, what exactly are you even accomplishing? What do? Do you come in, you set goals? What are they exactly helping you with, right? And if you don't have any models in your community that sort of tell you how that works, right? And if that's even counterculture to what you're supposed to be doing, I can imagine that would leave a lot of like that's a big barrier.
Absolutely.
to even want to seek out counseling.
Yeah, it's really like telling. So I remember someone who was trying to get their husband to go to therapy. And when she suggested it, he said, I ain't telling them white folks my business. And it was like, okay. And that tells you right there that people really don't understand what that process looks like or what the how do you say, the structure of therapy is to really help and provide you with that support. But also you have to be willing to ask the questions, right? Like if you really feel like there's more for me and I want more and I know I need support, you have to be open-minded and say, okay, yeah, I don't know what that is. It sounds crazy, but I'm willing to learn more about it. And so just when you think about your challenges, I want to ask, if you had one thing that could help you to reach this population, what would that one thing be?
That's really hard.
Yeah, that's a question.
Because I think, when we're trying to reach a population, it's just so many things.
Yes.
I don't know if it's just one thing. It can be difficult because when we're seeing clients, we're doing a biopsychosocial. We're getting the understanding of where did you grow up? Who's your parents? Where are they from? Were there any mental health issues? Any substance abuse issues? Any medical issues? So this it's a lot to get. So I think that's kind of a difficult question to answer, but I think that as a goal for myself as a clinician, I just want to find out what are your challenges today that's giving you dysfunction, and what do you want to do today to get out of that dysfunction. I think that's my biggest question that I ask a client: what can I do to get you out of your dysfunction today?
Well, at first they have to see it as a dysfunction.
True.
Right.
But I think they do see it as
If they come to you,
and see us.
that's right. That's the first step. Right.
Could you repeat the question again?
So today, this is my genie bottle. I'm gonna rub it. Genie's coming out. Genie can give you one thing that would really help you to be the best therapist you could be in this community. What would that one thing, that one tool, if you could have it, what would it be?
To access the community.
Yes. To better access the community or better serve the community.
Something that has worked is when you've been vetted by someone, like somebody that knows somebody, that kind of concept. Like I often find that in these communities, I would imagine, or I have seen that the success rate of retention or getting clients, I guess, has been based on because someone else in the community had access or had success with it, right? I think it's more trusted to hear someone that you know and trust who has gone through that process, like spreading the word in that way. And if and I think that people who have had services should be more open to share with their friends and their family. And it's amazing to hear, especially when you see like a very masculine Black male, for example, go to therapy, right? And then somehow, some way, a friend finds out that is in counseling. Like, that's a trip, right? That's like, wow, you of all people, you do. And I think that could really break down a lot of stigma, a lot of barriers. So really, I think it's the foot soldiers that are out there, the people that have received services, that have seen what it's like, that have seen some success, for them to be able to reach out to their own community and kind of normalize mental health, just mental health services.
I just want to put out, that's how we here today. Okay, because I am a strong advocate, again, for mental health, because I know what it could do. So, go ahead.
Um, I'm just thinking about like if it was just one thing, um, implementing something within certain systems, such as a school system or such as the medical system. Everyone is aware that once a year you need to get your physical, your annual physical, just to get a checkup, and then every 6 months you have to go to the dentist. And so, would there be a change within the society's understanding of mental health? Do you need a mental health checkup at any given point? And so to normalize it to the point where it's part of our lives. So I would say if it's one thing, a change within the system where everybody is aware, like, yeah, I got to make that doctor's appointment, or yeah, I got to go check in with a mental health clinician. So I would say that to answer the question.
Yeah. I like, recently I remember someone saying, everyone is so afraid to talk about mental health and the challenges of mental health. You'll go to the dentist, get your teeth fixed. You'll go to a podiatrist, get your foot fixed. You'll do everything. Why can't you go get your head fixed? It's a part of you. It's a part of your body, and it's the most important part of your body that you need to function, right? And to live an abundant life.
Correct.
That's the most important piece, and people are so afraid.
I tell clients when they come to see me, this is treatment. When you come see us clinicians, you're coming in for treatment. And it is mind, body, and spirit. It has to do with your soul,
Yes.
your spirit, your medical. If I broke my leg, I feel depressed because I can't get around. But how long does that depression last? What's your depression look like? Is it long lasting? And do you need medication? To get over the hump for right now, to take the monkey off your back. So when clients come see me, I let them know that this is treatment. I have clients that come in and they say, well, I'm not into the medication thing. Yeah, well, but you're not functioning at work. You're not functioning of getting out the bed. You're not showering. There's a problem. So if you need to be on an antidepressant or anti-anxiety or a mood stabilizer that's going to uplift you, then you take the medication so you can become to get out of that dysfunction, to be functional again. Well, how long will that take? Forever, if need be.
Yes.
Forever, if need be.
Yeah.
So, I let clients know that this is treatment. Whatever I recommend to you it's up to you to take it. If you don't, then, it is what it is.
Right.
I wanted to add, there was something that you had mentioned, and I'm trying to think back of what the words are. When I think it's the quickness of
The instant
the
gratification.
instant gratification. There you go. So I would call it the America's microwave effect.
Yes.
And that when you go see a medical doctor or you go see a dentist, it's normally with the notion that there's a certain level of pain that we are reaching our threshold, and this individual who has went to medical school has an answer to be able to alleviate the situation. If it's through surgery, a procedure, a medication. But I think when it comes to mental health, because it's a process. It's not like within mental health's history as a field. There's been a lot of fight to become a part of the science. It's a social science, but even though it's considered a social science, it's not a procedure that someone can go and seek out mental health or behavioral health support and immediately things change. Because it's a behavior, it's a way of thinking in which we're supporting a shift in that narrative. And if you've been living your life for the last 30, 20, 50 years, and there's a certain way of you thinking about something, I can't change that thinking for you. When it comes to Latin community that I tend to serve, a lot of them, not all of them, but a lot of them are influenced by religion. And with religion, there's this push of just pray, and then God's gonna fix it. And so for me, what I try to say, and they would say, some of the clients I've worked with might say, "Well, I'm coming here because my doctor had told me this, but I'm constantly praying." And when I jokingly say, "Well, if you believe in the idea that God has created everyone in His or her image, then just think of I was created in that same image. I'm here because of my passion towards wanting to support people." And so from there, that at least breaks a little bit of that ice. But then having to have a conversation with them about that, I wouldn't want you to expect leaving this initial meeting thinking like everything is solved.
Right.
Because I think I tend to get a lot of people literally asking me concrete, what should I do next?
Right.
And then I jokingly say, well, I'm not your mom. I'm not your dad. I
Yeah.
can't tell you what to do, because if I tell you what to do and if it doesn't work, then what does that say about counseling or therapy in general? So it's a bit hard for people because of the fact that they've been raised with this systemic idea that it's a medical model that we go in, we get fixed, and then we leave. And so I tell people another analogy I tend to use is you're not a car and I'm not a mechanic. I can't just diagnose the issue and replace it out of you and then put something in. So it doesn't work that way. We hold a lot of complexity because we're social beings.
Yeah.
Let me throw in, and I think to go with that, as our communities are becoming more fragmented, because people are transient, people are more mobile now with all these dating apps, right? That's evident of this idea that like people don't really stay in one place anymore. And, I guess back in the day, you would have a community that would create or provide you with this kind of like insulation and support, right? Now that people have become isolated and communities are fragmented, I think that it's natural to see the rise in mental health issues. Like we're beings that are meant to connect with each other, right, and be with each other. And as the more we become isolated, I think that to kind of answer your original question, like to understand that mental health counseling is extremely relevant. In my opinion, I think it's almost necessary as our communities become more fragmented. There is a huge relevance and need for mental health services. We are here to sort of act as that support in the face of such challenges like communities becoming fragmented. We're sort of hopefully the glue that tries to keep it somewhat stabilized, right? And help people, especially as they feel more isolated, to have some sense of like connection. Because when you come to counseling, a part that isn't really probably talked much about is the idea that you actually are creating a relationship with another person, right? That we're not just machines or robots that just sort of spit out answers, but the idea that inherently in this relationship, there is vulnerability, there is trust being built, and you are building a connection with someone, right? And if that alone is what's accomplished, I think that's huge to have a actually healthy relationship with someone to serve as like a template for
healthy relationships.
for healthy relationships, right? Sure.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing.
I want to go back to what Omar said. I run groups at my church, and the stigma that mental health should not be, God will fix everything, and the Holy Ghost is here, and it's all wonderful, and it's so true. But yet on this realm here, we need more. And my pastor, as other pastors have done, I know Bishop T.D. Jakes has his own ministry of licensed mental health counselors and social workers. But the church itself needs to understand that people can come in and they can feel good while they're there for that hour or two. But when they leave out, they're leaving out with the same issues and problems. And so as my church, I run groups, psychoeducational groups, and we talk about, death, stages of grief, stages of change, depression, anxiety, and how a person can, work through that. And if we need to redo some referrals, then we refer. But the churches, they need to, incorporate that. And so the people in the church can get a little more understanding that, God is here, God is good. But right here, the mind plays tricks on us, and we need to get that assistance. And, as clinicians, I don't know about any other males here, but I mean, I was in therapy, and, I need to reason some things out in my life, and get the help and change my thought process about some of the biases I had, some of the trauma I endured in life, because we all, go through things in life. My father used to say, live long enough and you'll go through things. So, the clinician needed a clinician, at one time to be able to reason things out. And I think that's important. And I think that once you have that relationship that you build up with the client, there's nothing wrong with saying, well, I was in therapy before too. Like, how do you think I sit over here now? Because I had to go through my process and learn some things about myself. That way I can help others.
Thank you. And so now to talk about the even more vulnerable population, children. And how would you advise parents to begin these mental health discussions with their kids, and either about themselves or about their child's mental health?
I think a big thing is modeling, right? It's so easy to shame our children, whether that's accidentally or on purpose, especially when they're feeling vulnerable. They're experiencing struggles in their life. Like sometimes we say things and do things that provoke shame, right? And sometimes we use shame as a form of motivation, right? We it does get the job done, right? If your child breaks the lamp and you reel into them and talk about how defective they are, how stupid they are, right? Like that's definitely going to keep them from breaking a lamp, but definitely damage their sense of self. And so if parents can model that in their own lives, right? We sort of have this like inner critic. Like as a therapist, I see all the time that people, when you ask people to say, what does that voice say in your mind that when you talk to yourself, it's pretty condemning. It's pretty like, wow, that's like you wouldn't say that to a friend, would you? But as parents really introspect and really, like you said, really pick up on their own issues and have a willingness to acknowledge, confront. And I think that helps create the kind of awareness that would then help their children as their children are experiencing, various challenges, to be able to say, oh, okay, yeah, like we're going to confront this together and, actually call a spade. Right.
I think working with families is very challenging. You know, when I used to do in-home therapy, I'm like, we're here to see the child, but we really just need to see the parents. Why is your child acting this way? And we're a product of our environment, the family of origin. And so if we have a child that's acting out, why is the child acting out? And as Kevin said, are you, shaming the child? Have you spanked the child? What type of a form of discipline are you using on the child? And thus the child will act out a certain way. Did the father leave? Did the father beat the mother? Did the father beat did the mother beat the father? Not just the man, doing other things too. Because there's women that are very dysfunctional too. So, what's really going on? And so as we service children, we should also all really be servicing that parent, because it takes two.
Yeah.
I would say it's the intersectionality of how of the intergenerational issues that have been brought down from one generation to the next. And so when so I would consider myself, even though I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist, even if I'm seeing individuals, I look at it from the lens of I'm doing relational work.
Yes.
Because I look at, as an individual, you're not just, you're a social being. So you're going to be in relationship to someone at some given point. If it's a family member, a coworker, a spouse, a child, you're going to be in relationship to people. And anxiety, depression, anger, mood, that's going to affect the relationships around you. And so when working with families and pertaining to children, a lot of the questions that come up to me is more of what is the parent's understanding of what it means to be a parent? And does the parent themselves know when is a good time to reach out for support? Because I think the thinking would be, well, my mom and my dad did this, so this is what I'm going to do, and I'm still alive, and I'm still okay. Yes. And so then culturally, within the Latinx population, the biggest thing that comes to my mind is discipline. Yes. For instance, in Latin culture, we can use the chancleta or the chancla, which is a flip-flop, as consequences. Or sometimes some folks might put their kids in a corner and put like dry rice and have them kneel down. And some cultures might get a switch or a twig from outside. And so it's just this idea of what like the cultural understanding of discipline as a parent and what is the value connected to those actions. And so I would say when it comes to children, as they are developing, even as a current parent myself, there's going to be moments that I'm getting upset. And there's going to be moments that even with the best of us that we have to slow things down. I would say personally, last week, I have a 2-year-old, and they are now into creating these little forts of pillows. And so they'll go in a corner of the couch and then just create a fort so that they can look at or whatever game that they're playing, if it's like toys or like one of those kids' tablets. And then all of a sudden I smell something. And then as I'm walking towards them, I know it's poop. And all of a sudden, like immediately I want to just like grab the child and just throw them to the side because they are literally digging in their Pampers and just smearing poop. And so in that moment, people can say, well, you're a therapist. You can just woosah and just calm down and just say like, oh, that's okay. But on the other side, I'm like, they just ruined the couch. Like it's just shit everywhere. And I'm like, it stinks. And so and I can see from their face, they are terrified because they know that what they just did, or my assumption is that they know what they did is something that we've been discussing like for a couple of days because we're trying to do potty training. And so would I just grab their wrists and then walk them to the bathroom, and I said, just stay right here. And then I went back and I'm like, oh man, what am I gonna do? And they're just staying right there because they're just terrified. And so, but that would be a moment of, I am also a human being, regardless of the fact of any training that I have done throughout the years. Yes. I'm still going to experience anger, frustration, and that I still have to develop ways as a human being to how do I manage these moments. And that comes from my exposure to my parents, my exposure to being in therapy myself, with providing the work. That's not easy. So to go back to answer the question, I would say, regarding children and how parents can best address it, with this generation that we're at, your best bet is Google. Go to Google and type up, my son is sad, what do I do? Right. Or I'm getting very upset, where can I get help? It's the idea of acknowledging that there needs to be some sort of intervention, versus I know what I'm going to do because my parents did it and so did their parents and we were all survived. But I think with each generation, they learn from the previous generation. And so I would say it goes back to having an understanding of whether or not, do you know whether or not you need help as a parent,
Right.
in order to help the child.
So many thoughts came up for me during this conversation. And as I think about when you said, Venita, about having to work with the whole family, and I think about DCF, and I think about social workers in DCF, and the fact that I've done a lot of youth work over my tenure of my professional work and working with young people who have mental health challenges. And so you can work with this young person, they can come to therapy at school, at an office, but then you send them back to the place that makes them sick.
Correct.
Right? And so like for a DCF therapist, it's like, yes, I have 5 kids that I'm working with right now, but your caseload is not 5 kids. Right. If there's 5 people in that family, 6, and that's that whole family and all those families. So now you're up to about 100 people on your caseload, right. And how challenging is that, right? And like, how do you meet the needs when you have that many people to work with, but also the challenge is where are the funds to lower those caseloads so that they can be more effective in working with those families. For me, as a parent, I have 2 children of my own. I think about, just like you said, Omar, is when you think about your culture and you're thinking about the way you were parented, and most people parent the way they were parented, right? And so for me, I have my first child at the age of 14, and I raised him the way my grandmother raised me. So I got my ass whooped with anything that was available. Right. If it was close, you was
got
getting it right. And I whooped his ass, right? Like when he was out of control, I whooped his ass. But now I have a second child, and I took this training called the parenting journey. And I'm also trained in the parenting journey. And through the parenting journey, it teaches you how to evaluate the way you were raised and to think about the way you were parented and what are some of those habits that you're bringing into your own parenting style that you despised as a kid, that just made you angry, that caused you trauma. And how are you now implementing that in your own parenting style? And what are some of the most amazing things and how are you implementing that? But also realizing that you have a decision to remove those things that you despised, because these are now your children and you have full control over how you're going to raise them. And you don't have to use the same method that was used for you growing up. I feel like the parenting journey was very powerful for me, just even with my oldest son, because I was not brought up having conversations. It was like, this is what I said.
Yeah.
Don't ask me no damn questions. Go sit your ass down.
That's right.
Right? And so now flipping that, and if my son says, Mom, but why? And I'll say, well, let's talk about it.
Right.
This is why. You know, and really engaging him in conversation and teaching him that it's okay to have a healthy disagreement.
Right.
Even though we're talking about it, doesn't mean my mind's going to change, but I can help you have a better understanding of why I'm taking this position. And I think that was so helpful for me, and it was new. Like, okay, what am I going to do? And, you know, I remember the other day, my grandmother always yelled. It didn't matter what. It could have been a good thing or a bad thing. She was yelling. And it used to drive me crazy. So my baby, who's 6 now, he'll be 7, was upstairs doing something. And I'm yelling, Gabriel. And he comes down. He's like, Mommy, why are you yelling? And, you know, prior me would have said, who the hell you talking to? But I said, you know what? I am yelling. And I don't know why, Mom. I'm sorry. I should not have yelled. And you know, and I can see how that impacted him. And it was like, and then we were able to move on smoothly. If there are more resources in the community, like the parenting journey, right, that could be offered as workshops, that can be given at community centers for parents, I think that would be so beneficial, to just be able to do something like that with parents. Now it's a commitment, because it's about 8 weeks that you have to participate in the program. And so parents have to be willing to commit, but I think it's so worth it. It's so worth it, because it will have a major impact on the lives of your children, and they don't have to go through what you go through. You know, like you can heal your kids before they know they have to be healed. You know, that's how I look at it. Yeah. Heal your kids before they know they have to be healed. You know, it doesn't have to be the damage is done.
Right.
You know, but what can we do now that we've recognized there is damage? How can we work together to move forward? And so thank you. And anything else from you? I thought that was really a good discussion. And, you know, children, I love children. So I don't want any more. Let's put that out there. But I mean, I love children. They're very near and dear to my heart. And so I feel like if we can help parents to be better parents and to be, you know, great parents. And I don't look at it as bad parenting.
Right.
You're doing what you know.
It's family of origin.
Right. You're doing what you know. And so I can't say you're a bad parent. You're doing the best you can with the knowledge you have. However, here's something else.
Correct.
Here's another tool you can use, right?
You know, it's when I was in college, something I would say the most important thing that I ever learned was the concept of being a transitional character. And basically the idea that in the course of a generation, that you change some dysfunctionality of your family, right? Like, you know, for me, my dad was an angry person, right? Just extremely angry, like violently angry. And I inherited that, right? And so, you know, and in my marriage, and my wife would say, you know, you need to work on this because I don't want our kids to have to experience this anger that you have. And, you know, and I was like, wow, like, so, you know, being in college at the time and learning about that a transitional character was a person who, in the course of a generation, just like the car is going straight or going left and then you just turn right, right? You know, granddad drank, dad drank, so do I drink, right? Right. Granddad was angry, my dad was angry. Am I going to have that kind of rage myself? And And I think as parents, the greatest thing we could do for our children, and we really don't have to be perfect. I think children are actually pretty flexible and plastic in some ways, right? That they can adapt. But if we are conscious about trying to turn that car, right, and change that narrative, that generational narrative, as Omar's was sharing, I think children seeing that effort, even if you're not perfect at it, that can make a huge difference in the life of a family.
Thank you.
So I would want to add to that that for folks to who's listening to this podcast or watching the film, to also know that if you are in that place and you're hoping to change a certain dynamic, that a lot of people tend to take the extreme route where if anger has been, I'll just use anger as an example. If anger has been existed with grandparents and your parents, then a lot of times people might say, well, I'm not going to be an angry parent. But then they have a very unhealthy relationship to anger where they don't know how to deal with it. And so they don't know how to cope with it. They don't know how to discuss or have discussions rather about it. And so they just go to the opposite extreme. And also that it's what I would say would be it's not your job as an individual to try to change your family. It's more of what are you willing to do in terms of changing your relationship to the dynamics. So if you're recognizing that maybe it's unhealthy to spend time with this cousin because it's creating a lot of angst or anger or anxiety just to be around them. It's okay to not want to put yourself in that situation. And that if you feel as though you need help on how to navigate that, then that would be a moment in time you say, well, let me go seek out some suggestions or advice from a therapist or a counselor. Because that's the space for you to think through. It's not to say that you can't go to your friends to talk to them. I would say when it comes to family and friends, everyone is trained in common sense, but common sense is not all that common. So you might go to someone, they might give you some of their suggestions, but what's the likelihood that that's going to be in best support of your need in that moment? Because they're not fully understanding, or they might just be biased and go on your side. So going to a counselor or a therapist would be just to have that space to think through what choice you want to make for yourself in order to better your mental health. And especially if it's in relationship to intergenerational issues that have happened within the family, that maybe you can't choose who your family is, but you can choose the relationship that you have with them that might support your own well-being in order to move forward. So I would say that.
Thank you. And so with that being said, I just want to make sure everyone heard that. It's okay to let go of toxic relationships, friends or family. Let them go. All right. And so my next question for you is, what tips would you give someone who is interested in accessing mental health services on finding the right fit?
I think that, as we talked about the lack of resources, there's not like a big poster board that says here, seek these services here, and that's the unfortunate. There's a lot of services out here, but it's like stuck in between a sheet, and a lot of people don't know. You can Google help, say, help for depression, and maybe something will come up. And I think Omar said that, we have Google today, like, there's so much now on the World Wide Web that you can find anything you want. So if you have issues on depression, you can look up, therapists in my area, and it would come up with something, that could help you. Psychology Today is a place where you can find clinicians, private practice clinicians. You can ask your doctor. If you have a primary care doctor, is there a community agency that you work with in the area? So, there's different ways to do it. But because we have the World Wide Web right now, you can find everything and anything you need that can at least get you started in the direction that you're looking for.
I think that I kind of use a silly example, but sometimes I say it's like finding a hairstylist. Like once you find it, you just stick with it, right? And the idea that a consumer, right, a person seeking therapy, like looking for the right fit, looking for the right person, or that they have the power to do that, right? I think I've heard a lot from people that said, I tried therapy, it was had a bad experience, or it's not for me. And it's like, well, not all therapists are the same, right? We have our own quirks and style and background, education and experience, and even just the feel of it, right? Like, and so that's okay. I think it's okay to understand and like shop around, right? And I often tell my clients, like, this might not work. This might not fit. It might not work for me, actually. And I might have to let you go. And so I think it's the benefit of both parties to figure out the right synergy, the right, just background that works for you, and for you to feel like you're empowered to be able to make those decisions, and to walk away and seek something else when it doesn't work, but not give up. I think a lot of people just try once, it's not working, or it's slow and kind of methodical, and so they just stop.
Yeah, that's the key. Don't give up.
Right,
Like,
right.
if I go to a hairstylist and I didn't like them, I'm never going back there. But I still need a hairstylist, right? I still need to look good. So now I have to find someone who can meet my needs. And so if you won't give up on a hairstylist, you won't give up on a barber, you won't give up on the person that does your nails, why would you give up on your mental health? You look at it like that. You don't give up on any of those other things. Don't give up on what matters most.
To be able to emphasize that example of, if I were to like break it down into different steps, the first is to understand that therapy is a service. And just with any service provider, from a mechanic to a hairstylist or a barber, to whatever, that there are different people that have different skills, and that you go to them because of a certain skill set that they offer. The second would be, okay, so if you have an understanding that it's a service that's being provided, then how do I find that service? You could decide to set up an appointment with your primary care, assuming you have access to a primary care physician or a doctor. If you don't want to go that route, you can go online and go to Google and just say find a therapist or a therapist near me. And then some of the top ranking sites would be psychologytoday.com. And you can easily, on that website, you can just type in your zip code. So that way it could locate someone near you. On that specific website that a lot of private practicing therapists tend to use, assuming that it's a good tool for them to use, there are options on that website that you can narrow down your results, such as narrow down based on your insurance, narrow down based on language, based on gender, based on ethnicity, or based on the issues that you're looking for, looking for some support. And then I think you had mentioned around the term of consumer, that because you're going to be a consumer of this service, you also want to think about shopping around. Just because you see one therapist and you're like, well, I'm not sure if it went well. You're investing your time and energy and commitment to this person who is providing your service. So it's going to be an investment for yourself to be able to look through and say, you know what, I'm going to shop around. And it's okay to tell the therapist that, hey, I've set up appointments with other folks because I'm just trying to make sure it's a good fit. Most therapists are going to be grateful for that sense of transparency, because at least from a therapist or business perspective, at least we can do the best that we can to sell you on our service. And our service is our ability to connect with you in that first initial meeting. And I think people tend to forget that we're providing a service, but there's also a business for us, because we also have bills that we have to pay. And unless you're paying out of pocket, most of the payment will come from the insurance. And so, and I don't want people or the audience to think that we're just doing this for money, because money like with any employment, supports our ability to maintain our daily living. It's just that we made a choice as therapists to commit ourselves to doing a job that we care for, and we would also like to be paid for.
Right.
And so, I also want folks to think through the idea that there's a difference between going to a friend for advice and going to therapy.
Right.
A friend is not providing you a service. A friend is providing you that sense of companionship, that sense of camaraderie. In counseling, it's about, we went to school to study how to facilitate a conversation to support people around thinking through their situation. Because sometimes with the busyness of life, and like the comment I made earlier about the America's microwave effect, we tend to think about fast-paced, just fast-paced scenarios. So for us, in that 50-minute time frame or that hour time frame, we are working to slow things down so that that way the questions that we ask are geared towards allowing you that space to think. Because outside of that, when do you have space to think? If you have a lot of space to think, you're just thinking about yourself. You don't have a think partner to support you with being able to slow it down and make different choices. So understand it's a service. Go online and go to your local physician to get a referral for counseling. You have the choice to switch. If you end up doing it through the PCP, understand that it's a network within the hospital setting. So it might be a bit different versus if you were to go online and search for someone, you can easily just make different appointments with people. And when it comes to a good fit, just think about it as, when I talk to this person, do I feel connected? Do I feel heard? Do I feel listened to? Did I feel like I got anything from that meeting? Even if it meant all I did was talk most of the time, and I can see that that person was listening to me, even through small moments of body language, shaking their head, maybe writing down notes, giving you body language cues that they are paying attention. Those are going to be things that are going to support one's notion of if it's a good fit or not.
Thank you. I think one really important thing that I took away from what you just said was slow down, right? Like in our world, everything is fast paced.
Right.
We need everything right now, microwave effect,
Right.
internet, text, like everything is right now. How do I slow down? I drink tea. Tea forces me to slow down. I look at my therapy sessions as an opportunity to slow down. I look at church as an opportunity to slow down and just be still for a minute with everything that's going on around us. So I think that, thank you, all of you. And I just think just slowing down is so important to even just slow down and think about what you need.
Correct.
I think I need a therapist. Just slow down and think about what do you need. And so when we talked about access and how to find a good fit, can you please tell our listeners and our viewers what are the steps? Once you find a therapist, once you go on Google, now what? You call the therapist? Like, what are the steps to securing an appointment with a therapist?
Yeah, I mean, the best way is to reach out. I think if you were to go in psychology today, there's a phone number, there's generally an email address associated with it. I think just reaching out and saying, hey, I'm interested in seeking out services, just ask the therapist what's the next step. Usually each therapist will sort of have a method that they use. So most likely they'll either call you or email you and just ask, basic questions about the situation and assess if their personal experience can match with that. There's generally an initial appointment. They call it initial consultation, and sometimes that first meeting is crucial to set your goals, share what's going on, and getting a lot of information about the context that is being worked with, or what has led you towards counseling. But ideally, the therapist will be able to help navigate that. Once you reach out, there should be a dialogue from a communication that in which the therapist will sort of lead what the next steps are.
Okay.
What I'll add to that is, if folks do look online and they end up onto the Psychology Today page or even on someone's website. A lot of these sites include like a profile for the therapist. So your best bet is just to take time and read through whatever they wrote down. A lot of times the sites tend to gear us as therapists to pose questions for people to think about, or just to write a quick synopsis of what are the services that we do provide. If you feel if based on what you read seems as though this person might be able to support my needs, then you can either call or email them, and there will be links there. From a business perspective, at least from my experience, I try to respond back immediately because of the fact that it's a business, and my hope is to be able to get as many clients as I can based on the number of openings. So if someone contacts me, I personally look at it as I have a window of either minutes to an hour to respond, because that person can easily also email other people. And sometimes people might say, well, you're the first one who called back. And immediately that to me would be a lead. So that's a lead to me from a business perspective, and I'm going to immediately try to set them an appointment. From a consumer perspective, one of the things I would say would be make sure that you have a full understanding of what your schedule is like. Go based on what you prefer in terms of time-wise to make sure it's a good fit. So that way it's a convenience for you to be able to go to the service rather than you trying to make it more convenient for us. If we don't have the availability, but you feel as though we're still a good fit, then we'll try to work something out. And if you choose to email, I've experienced both on the tail ends. Some people say, I want to set up an appointment. Can I do some counseling? To people sending me a whole entire novel of what their situation is. And it's okay if you guys sent that, because I'll still read it. At least that lets me know that you're at a stage where you are ready to get some support. And so I'm not going to make any judgments on it. I'm just looking at it from the perspective of this person is in serious need of support, and this is their way of expressing it.
So thank you all for that. And so I have my last question for all of you. For our viewers and listeners, if you can give 2 tips that people can begin to implement in their daily lives, their daily activities, that can just help with improving their mental health overall, what would those 2 tips be?
Get 8 hours of sleep.
Yes. Oh,
And watch what you eat. I think that, again, mind, body, and soul, people are not aware of their eating habits. And if you're eating a lot of fried food, if you're eating a lot of sugar, you're just putting the wrong things in your body, your body's going to react to that. Your mind's going to react to that. So, sleep is very important, and really watching your diet. Your diet has a lot to do with how your body and your mind reacts to your life situations.
thank you.
I think a big one is a couple things. This idea of mindfulness, that's sort of the new wave right now, but very powerful one. This idea of slowing down enough to be in the present moment. I think a lot of times, like, we do a lot of escaping, right? Especially how good Netflix is these days. It's easy to come home from work and just clonk out, right? Just turn the TV on and just check out. And I think that with all this escaping, right, it's without being in the moment, the present moment, we can miss out on a lot, whether that's just the emotions that are coming up, what we're thinking and feeling, and actually just like living, right? Like thriving is sort of in the present moment. And so I would say a big thing is just find 5-10 minutes. A lot of people are just mindfulness meditation or mindful eating, just mindfully practicing being in the moment, the presence of now. Along with that, the idea that like we engage in a lot of compulsive behaviors, right? An easy read is just our cell phones. Like I definitely know I have this habit of just touching that button that lights it up, or if there's a light that goes off, I just look at it and I have to pick up my phone, even though I'm not really looking for anything. It's just a habit, right? And that compulsive behavior, sometimes we have a lot of those that just go unchecked. right? And I think just building an awareness of that, just even if you're conscious about touching the phone, obviously it's harder, easier said than done. We can learn to start separating ourselves from that and breaking free from these sort of subconscious, unconscious behaviors that we have that oftentimes lead us towards, indulgence, compulsivity, dysfunctionality, and whatnot. So that would be a big one. And then the other piece is checking that inner critical voice. I think, when you think about self-esteem and self-compassion, like we're not meant to really measure our self-esteem that much. It's like getting on the scale every day. If you check the scale every day, that you're probably going to get a misread, right? Because there's not enough time or data point that goes by as you're trying to make an effort to, say, exercise or get healthy, and constantly and obsessively checking the scale would probably be a deterrent. It would be discouraging. Same thing with self-esteem. I think we check in our self-esteem so much, and this critical voice that we have oftentimes really feeds into that, thus sort of diminishing our sense of self-worth, and challenging that critical voice with self-compassion, right? That finding this voice of gentleness and compassion within you, and trying to look at your situation from a compassionate lens, I actually think can help you actually, succeed or move further in your goals, right? So,
Thank you.
I would say my two would be both connected to technology. First would be to use technology to access education. What I mean by that would be every time I'm driving into work, I'll go on my phone and at a red light, might search up a motivational video just to get my head going. And so I might play it and then connect it to the aux cord to the stereo system in the car and just listen to that. And so that at least is one way for me to just get my mindset going, and I'm using technology. Or if I feel as though I don't have the time to read, I might purchase a book and listen to it on the drive. So that way, at least I'm educating myself on a daily basis. And so using that resource to be able to get as much information and doing something with it. So that would be my first one. The second one would be the opposite, which what I would call disconnect to reconnect. Try to disconnect ourselves from the use of technology as a way to connect with people that are around us. I think with changes through generation, we have gotten to the point where we're so dependent on phones, because phones essentially is a very small miniaturized computer where we have access to people and information at any given time. But I think what ends up happening, and what I've seen through my experience in private practice, especially providing couples work, is that people get so connected online that they forget that their partner's right. It's literally sitting right next to them. And so they're always complaining about, well, we never get a chance to spend time with each other. We never really have the same levels of intimacy that we once had when we first met each other. And so a lot of times they're connected to their phone playing games. They're on Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, whatever platform that they're using for social media. So I would suggest to sometimes it's okay to not feel like you need to Netflix and chill, not feel as though you need to be on your phone and respond to any messages that are there. That it's okay to turn off the phone, let it charge, and just live your life with the people around you. And advice for parents would be, if you have invested in internet system, meaning like a Wi-Fi router, disconnect the Wi-Fi. And then how else are the children going to be able to use it? When it comes to video game systems, instead of parents disconnecting the whole system, just disconnect the power cord. Because then at least they can just see the video game system there, but they can't really use it. So that way, that's a way to disconnect so that you can reconnect. When was the last time people actually sat down and had a meal together? A lot of it is to go. Like, we don't have time. We are not able to sit down and talk as a family. And those are the issues that systemically create an absence of understanding of how to express yourself, how to express emotions, having honest conversation with your parents and your kids about what's going on in our everyday lives. And when you lose that sense of connection, then you rely it on others, and then that becomes a negative behavior or interaction that you might end up thinking it's normal. But then when you come across people in college or in the workforce, you end up learning that, oh no, it is an issue. So I would say that.
Thank you. Well, I want to thank you all for joining us today, and I'm going to put my 2 cents in. I'm going to recommend that you be kind to yourself and sign up for this podcast. Thank you all again for joining us today. Thank you for joining me and my guests on this episode of Heal with Carmen B. If you would like to learn how to connect with these individuals, their information will be located in the description of this podcast, and you'll be able to connect with them and get more information if you're interested in working with them. Thank you again.